Mark 15, we read, "At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, 'Eloi, Eloi, lima sabachthani,' which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. In Mark 15 and also in Matthew's Gospel and also in Luke, we read that during Jesus' crucifixion from noon till 3 p.m., a supernatural darkness covered the land. On that first Good Friday, the world went dark. Imagine the hours of the day when the sun should have been at its brightest. Instead, this darkness consumes the land. How would you feel? How would you react? Would you be scared? Would you feel anxious or uncertain? Would you feel as though the world were coming to an end? It's the hottest part of the day, and yet the sun's light is covered, its warmth dimmed, and its brightness subdued. We wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse of that by asking you to wear blindfolds today. And I'm not sure how that made you feel, having your eyes covered, sitting in darkness. But perhaps you caught a glimpse of something that was going on for Jesus in that very moment. And the question that it raises for us is, well, why did the world go dark on that first Good Friday? Why did God turn day into night? It was not the first time that God had shrouded the earth in darkness. In Exodus chapter 10, we read that one of the plagues upon Egypt was a 3-day darkness. And through the plagues, God was exercising his judgment upon Egypt for the way they had oppressed God's people and enslaved them. And through exercising his justice, he brought about deliverance for the nation of Israel. Now, the prophet Amos speaks of a time when again darkness would cover the land. He recounts God's words to him in Amos chapter 8, where he says this, "In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. I will turn your religious festivals into mourning and all your singing into weeping. I will make all of you wear sackcloth and shave your heads. I will make that time like mourning for an only son, and the end of it like a bitter day." Amos speaks of a day when God would bring the full weight of his divine judgment upon the sin of the world, as God abhors sin. That is the selfishness, the evil and injustice that flows out of us when we ignore God and do our own thing. You see, God cannot ignore sin. To do so would compromise his justice. And so in a moment of staggering grace and righteousness, he satisfies his justice by placing the full weight of our punishment upon Jesus, the Son of God. And in the darkness, Jesus is crushed for our iniquities. Now, this truth is both deeply confronting, but also profoundly comforting. It's comforting because we can be assured that the God we worship is not indifferent to the evil and injustice that grieve and enrage us. He sees it too, and he's righteously angered by it. Yet it is also confronting, because if we are honest, the same injustice and evil we see in the world also resides within us. Lust, envy, malice, gossip, slander, lying, cheating, idolatry, greed, these things are not only out there, but they live within the human heart. None of us are innocent. The sin in each of us puts us on the wrong side of God's judgment, except for Jesus. Because of Jesus, God is merciful to us. If not for Christ, none of us could bear the crushing weight of the punishment that our sin deserves. I wonder, do we really feel the gravity of our sin? Do we feel the weight of that kind of darkness? Do we comprehend what our sin costs? Augustine once said, when the sun failed, it was as if the world hid its face in shame. Let us not be slow to do the same. Let us bow our hearts, seeing what our sin has cost. I want to invite you just in a reflective moment right now to take the pebble that is on your seat. It's not a very heavy pebble. But the interesting thing about pebbles is if you get them in your shoe, they're incredibly irritating. And it's hard to walk around with a pebble in your shoe. But I want you to take that pebble and think about the reality of sin. Sin is a little bit like a pebble in your shoe. It cripples you in a way. It's hard to take. It's hard to handle. It's weighty. It's serious. And I want you to think for a moment upon these couple of questions. Do I feel the weight of my own sin? And what does it mean to me that Jesus bore the wrath meant for me? Now just take 1 minute in the silence of this room just to think about those couple of things, holding on to that pebble in your hand. The darkness is a reminder of the seriousness of sin and the price that was paid for its forgiveness. But you know, the darkness also reminds us of the pain of abandonment. Jesus cries out at the end of the darkness, the 3-hour darkness, he cries out, my God, why have you abandoned me? And he is quoting Psalm 22, a psalm that begins with deep sorrow but ends with praise and hope. And it's a prophetic psalm. It's a psalm that foretells the shame and pain of the crucifixion. And this psalm tells of one who will have insults hurled at him, whose garments will be divided, whose hands and feet will be pierced, alone and history prior to his incarnation, during his incarnation, and post-resurrection. Jesus loses consciousness of his Father's presence. In this moment, he is all alone, carrying the world's sin without the comfort of divine fellowship. The one who knew perfect communion since eternity past now experiences silence, forsaken, not because of his sin, but because of ours. There is no greater pain than abandonment. Of all the worst places that a person can be in, the place of loneliness is by far the hardest. We can endure many hard things in this life with the help of others, but to be all alone in this world, I want to suggest there is nothing harder. Indeed, there's no greater suffering than being cut off from relationship with others, except that is to be cut off from the relationship with our Creator God, the one who knows us and loves us. Sin separates us from God's presence. It robs us of the joy, peace, and comfort that can only come through relationship with God. Jesus felt that separation too on the cross when he bore our sin. He was left to suffer alone so that we would never have to. Think about your own life with God and your relationship with him. On your seat there was some red material, torn material. I want you to take that into your hand for a moment. And it's representative of the veil in the temple that was torn into the moment that Jesus died. And what that veil represented was the separation between us and God's holy presence. At the moment that Jesus died, the veil was torn open and access to God's presence was opened up to us. I want you to take that cloth in your hand. Remember what great price access to the Father came. But think about these questions. When have you felt abandoned by God? And how does it change things to know that Jesus entered into your loneliness? So I want to give you a minute to just reflect upon those couple of questions. Look at the cloth, the torn cloth. Roll it around in your hands. The darkness reminds us that Jesus went through the ultimate loneliness for us. When we feel distant from God, we can turn to the one who knows what it means to feel forsaken. And the darkness also reminds us that loss is very real. In Luke's account, he writes this, It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining. Luke writes that the sun stopped shining. And it's a picture of all creation mourning as the Creator hung dying. Augustine writes of it saying that the sun withdrew its light and day turned into night, as though creation itself could not bear to look upon its Lord hanging on the tree. A deep sorrow reverberated through the cosmos as the Son of God, the light of the world, the Word became flesh, love incarnate, hung dying on a cross. This was a cataclysmic event in all of Earth's history and in the whole universe. For in this moment, death would take the Son of God and his light would be dimmed. In this moment, it would appear as though the devil and sin and death had won. And in this moment, all creation mourned and God the Father grieved. It was not easy for him to give his only Son. The earth was veiled in darkness as though it donned a mourning veil. And even though the resurrection would come, the loss in that moment was real and experienced by all of heaven and earth. And T. Wright says this, the whole creation, as it were, is thrown into chaos. The sun itself is ashamed to look upon this scene. The darkness is the sign of creation's sorrow and of God's grieving. The cosmos wept for the Son of God. Do we weep also? In a little-known hymn by Frederick W. Faber, he invites us to come and mourn for a while. It's an invitation to come and see Jesus on the cross afresh and to mourn the reality that love himself had to die a cruel death on our behalf. The words go like this, "O come and mourn with me a while. O come ye to the Saviour's side. O come together, let us mourn. Jesus, our love, is crucified." Have we no tears to shed for him? While soldiers scoff and Jews deride, ah, look how patiently he hangs. Jesus, our love, is crucified. 7 times he spake, 7 words of love, and all 3 hours his silence cried, for mercy on the souls of men, Jesus, our love, is crucified. O break, hard heart of mine, thy weak self-love and guilty pride, his Pilate and his Judas were, Jesus, our love, is crucified. A broken heart, a fount of tears, ask and they will not be denied. A broken heart love's cradle is, Jesus, our love, is crucified. A broken heart, a fount of tears, ask and they will not be denied. Good Friday was the moment when the hope of redemption began, but it's also a moment when the full weight of loss was felt. And the reality is that as we live in this broken world, for the time being, we will experience grief and loss because we have to endure living within a broken world. But the good news is that God is not immune to our sorrow and he is not unmoved by it, for he is well acquainted with what it means to grieve. I want you to take a moment, just in silent reflection, to think, what grief are you holding today? What sadness? What sorrow? And can you let yourself mourn with God, knowing that he mourns with you? So take a minute to think about that. Good Friday, the day the world went dark. Some tried to explain it as a natural eclipse, but there was plenty of evidence to suggest otherwise, that this darkness was supernatural and divine, and that this supernatural darkness demonstrated the weight of sin as Jesus absorbed our punishment, the pain of abandonment as Jesus was forsaken, and the grief of the universe as the light of the world died. But the darkness was not the end. It would only be temporary, for soon the resurrection would come. John Stott says the darkness of Good Friday was the prelude to the dawn of Easter Sunday. If we do not understand the depth of the darkness, we will never appreciate the brilliance of the light. We have to dwell sometimes in the darkness in order that we might appreciate the light. Today has been about taking a moment to reflect upon the reality of how cruel and horrible the cross was. And in a moment we are going to partake of communion, which are tangible reminders of the crucifixion of Jesus. The bread symbolizes the body of Christ broken for us, and the wine, his blood shed for us. But I want you to sit for a moment just reflecting upon the significance of the divine darkness that covered the earth. And I'm going to invite you to sit again with one or two of those questions, with the stone and the cloth in your hands, and just take some more time before we participate in communion to really reflect upon those. The questions will come up on the screen and some music will come to play. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to continue to think about those questions, and then we'll share in communion together.